The World Travel and Tourism Council has warned the COVID-19 pandemic could cut 50 million jobs worldwide in the travel and tourism industry. Asia is expected to be the worst affected, and the council says once the outbreak is over, it could take up to 10 months for the industry to recover. The tourism industry currently accounts for 10% of global GDP. Joining me now to talk about this is the CEO of Nigeria Travel Week and the coordinator of Nigeria Tourism Award, Efotobe Awana. Thank you very much for joining us, Efotobe.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we have seen lockdown in practically most of the countries. Here in Nigeria, major airports have been shut down, airlines have shut down. Can you paint a picture what this period has been like for the travel and tourism industry, first globally, and then we have here in Nigeria?
Well, we're in unprecedented times. It has never been this terrible. And just like you mentioned, we're looking at millions of people losing their livelihoods. Around the world, we have tourism businesses that are collapsing already. The airlines are collapsing. One of the biggest, in fact, the biggest regional airline in Europe, Flybe, which operates out of the UK, is collapsed already, and a lot more will collapse. And then when you look at the fact that the tourism industry basically is one that operates on very slim margins, you can understand why this is really, really affecting the tourism industry.
Now, before this pandemic, what was business like?
When you say before this pandemic, are you saying 2 months back or?
Well, before this COVID-19, I mean, we started hearing of it last year, December.
December.
Starting from China. Of course, before now, what was it like, the industry?
Well, the industry has always been, naturally, everything that affects people traveling affects the industry. And globally, there have been a number of issues that, have affected. For example, the Flybe case, there were a few shocks that they had that they were trying to cope with. For example, they had to cope with fuel increase. And so about some months back, they were bought over. And then this happened. So every single shock, every single thing that affects people traveling or affects any of those factors that could determine the cost of travel affects the industry. And for Nigeria, even before now, before this total lockdown, from 2 months back, we have started having cancellations. In fact, from January, because people began to be scared. Nigerians naturally don't want to take those kind of risks, and so people started to cancel. And only those who had to essentially travel were traveling. And so that means that, people have only been paying salaries and making refunds where possible in the past few months.
All right, Efotobe, just hold your thoughts there. We have news coming in now, which says that the Supreme Court has dismissed the application filed by the All Progressive Congress in Zamfara State, seeking a review of the judgment by the Apex Court, which sacked the party from government after the 2019 general elections. In a lead judgment by Justice Eyang Okoro, the court held that the application is vexatious, frivolous, and a gross abuse of court process. The court awarded the cost of 2 million naira to be paid by the applicant to the first to 140th respondents. All right, who are taking the hit the most, the airline or the travel agency?
Well, it will be difficult to say one sector is taking the hit the most. Of course, everybody is taking the hit. Every aspect of the travel industry works with very slim margins. The travel agents and tour operators, for example, are the most vulnerable, I would say, because naturally, when things like this happen, they are the ones who would get the least intervention funds and all of that. In fact, I don't know of any funds like that for Nigeria. Every other country in the world, or most countries, have tourism intervention funds where the downstream sector of the aviation industry is able to get some reprieve from. But for Nigeria, I doubt that we have anything of the sort.
And with all of these things, would you seek for there to be a kind of an intervention? We have seen both the fiscal and the monetary authority come up with a lot of stimulus packages to, ensure that people are able to survive, dealing with this pandemic. Do you see the federal government perhaps coming to the rescue?
Well, the federal government will have no choice but to start to give attention to this sector. when you look at the fact that this industry is responsible for 10% of global GDP, and that in the last 4 years, it has been responsible for one out of every 5 new jobs. And the oil crash, the oil price crash is also a factor that will really be affecting us. So we need to start to look at the tourism industry. Domestic tourism on its own is able to help us cushion some of the effects of the oil price issue. And we have to start to look at how to get those funds to the downstream sector of the aviation industry.
Now, you talked about a lot of people canceling, their movement and their bookings. How did the travel agencies and perhaps tour operators, how were they able to handle the pressure from people, particularly those that are probably asking for refund?
Well, there's a global campaign which is spearheaded by UNWTO, which is basically Travel Tomorrow. And that campaign is to encourage people to postpone their trips as against canceling it. And in fact, the airlines in Nigeria, around the world, that's the approach they're taking. So instead of giving cash refunds, they're giving vouchers so you can travel with later on. So that's the campaign. That's also what we're trying to preach to people who were supposed to have traveled this period. To say, look, calm down a bit, and then there will be opportunities to travel in. So instead of asking for a refund, then let's push that trip to a later date.
But are they listening? Because I've heard a lot of travel agencies complain of so much pressure from their customers.
Naturally, a lot of people who listen, a lot of people are reasonable and they understand that this has never happened before. And the pressure is not just only on the travel and tour operators, but also on the airlines. So people are listening, yeah.
Now, with everywhere locked down, what alternatives do people in this business have?
Things will change. At this point, there's nothing that anyone can do because we have to try and do our best to support government initiatives, and that's the first thing to do is to stay at home and to relax while this. But then this will help us to start to think about new ways of doing business. How do we take advantage of online channels and all of the other things that we may not have been paying a lot of attention to in the past? And then, of course, there may be some time for sober reflections. Why have we not been paying enough attention to domestic tourism? I believe that if we had a thriving domestic tourism, it may have been a lot easier for government to shut down our borders earlier on. But, naturally, there will be that worry of how are we going to be able to cope with the oil price issue and then shutting down the economy. So these are the, over time, things will change, but the industry will survive because it's very resilient.
What is the outlook for the sector?
ITA says that we're looking at 25% loss in jobs and revenue for the industry. So it looks very bleak. Events, are canceling. I imagine that this weekend there's a major event that was supposed to have, or Easter, over the Easter break, for example, that was supposed to happen in Ondo State, which was to promote tourism. So events like that will cancel, and things will change, but over time we'll get through it. It will just need us to take some time to do some thinking and strategizing, and try and, as much as possible, support the government and all the agencies, healthcare workers who are doing their best to help us stay safe. All
right. Thank you very much for your time, Ifetobe Awana. And how can you be productive working from home? That will be our discussion when Business Morning returns. Do stay with us.